Captain Darius Kane pressed his back against the cold alloy wall, his breath shallow, his ears tuned to the thrum of alien boots echoing through the corridor ahead. The derelict station's recycled air smelled of rust and ozone, tinged with the sour musk of reptilian bodies. Somewhere behind the sealed bulkheads, voices barked orders in guttural tones, the language of hunters confident in the closing of their net. Kane adjusted the grip on his battered rifle, its magazine half-spent, its stock scarred by years of service. The weapon was less tool and more companion, but he knew it alone would not be enough. What mattered now was resolve. The Varict thought him cornered. That was their mistake. Word had spread through the mercenary channels weeks before. A bounty was on his head, rich enough to buy half a fleet. The Varict clan, smug in their reputation as trackers and slave-takers, had answered the call. They had herded him across this empty carcass of a station, cut off his exits, and sealed him into a labyrinth they believed would suffocate his chances. Kane let them. He moved as though shackled by inevitability, yet every step was measured, every decision deliberate. A man born on Earth learned early the difference between panic and patience. The aliens whispered about Deathworlders, though most did not believe the stories. They said men from Earth had grown teeth sharper than steel, that their bones could resist blades, that they fought on when disemboweled. They painted humans as monsters half-imagined, half-remembered from wars long buried in the annals of galactic history. Kane never corrected them. Let them tremble at phantoms, it was safer that way. The truth was less supernatural but no less terrifying. Earth forced its children to master hardship, or perish. Predators stalked every jungle. Storms flattened cities. Volcanoes, droughts, ice ages all had left their mark. Humans were not invincible, they were merely unwilling to die quietly. Kane slid along the wall until he reached a darkened junction where 3 corridors met. The station's lights flickered, running on reserves. Shadows stretched long across the floor. He crouched low, listening. The heavy steps of Varict boots carried from the left passage. From the right came the faint hiss of static comms interference, likely masking another squad's movements. Straight ahead, silence, which meant nothing good. He had been in too many ambushes to mistake silence for safety. He thought briefly of Earth, not of its green forests or blue skies, but of the times its merciless terrains tested him. He recalled crossing the Gobi's blistering dunes with nothing but a canteen and a broken compass, remembered the choking humidity of Amazonian jungles where every plant cut, stung, or poisoned. He thought of deserts where men boiled in their armor and mountains where the cold turned skin to glass. Each trial had left scars invisible but indelible. They had built him into a creature the galaxy never understood, adaptable, relentless, and above all, dangerous when pressed. A voice, guttural and proud, broke the silence ahead. "Human, we know you hear us. Surrender. The clan offers a quick death." Laughter followed, harsh and hissing. Kane smiled, though no one saw it. Quick death, from slavers who broke bones for sport? He had learned long ago not to waste belief on liars. The voice carried on, weaving threats with promises, but Kane barely listened. He was tracing the rhythm of the speaker's words, mapping the echo to fix their position in the corridor. His pulse remained steady. Years of training had burned fear out of him, or perhaps it had simply calcified into something useful. Fear sharpened his senses, drove him to calculate every angle. These corridors were not cages, they were funnels. The Varict thought they tightened the noose. In truth, they brought themselves closer, compressing their numbers into narrow lines, giving him choke points. If they wanted to corner him, he would turn the corner into their grave. A faint scrape behind him told him another squad had moved into place. He did not look back. He pictured them clearly, scaly hands gripping carbines, teeth bared in anticipation, the glimmer of triumph in predatory eyes. He imagined their commander's smug certainty that this was the end. Kane had seen that certainty before in ambushes, in skirmishes, in war zones littered with the dead. Certainty always cracked the same way when blood began to spray. He knelt, brushed his hand against the floor, and felt a vibration beneath the plating. Heavy boots closing in. The Varict had committed fully. They were drawing tight, sealing every escape route. It should have filled him with dread. Instead, it filled him with grim satisfaction. Now they were close enough. Now they were his. He leaned his head back against the wall, exhaled slowly, and whispered to himself, not as reassurance, but as memory, never corner a Deathworlder. The phrase had been spoken to him by a sergeant years ago, a man who dragged Kane from the mud of a battlefield and shoved a rifle into his hands. That sergeant was long dead, bones buried beneath foreign soil, yet his words lived on. They carried Kane now, a mantra older than fear. The footsteps grew louder, voices overlapping. He caught the faint hum of powered rifles charging. He glanced at his weapon, thumbed the magazine, and accepted it would not last the night. Good. Ammunition was a crutch. The fight would not be decided by bullets, but by will. He pressed forward into the junction, moving with the silence of a predator. The alien squad ahead halted mid-sentence, sensing his presence. Behind him, the rear squad tightened formation. He stood at the center of their jaws, a man alone against an army. Yet he felt no despair. The moment was right. The trap was sprung, but not on him. He drew a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and prepared to strike. The derelict station groaned around him, its walls carrying the echoes of movement and fear. Kane's lips curled into a smile sharp as a blade. The Varrict believed him finished. They would learn the truth soon enough. The air thickened with anticipation. Weapons lifted in the dark. For a heartbeat, everything stilled, as if the station itself held its breath. Kane's eyes narrowed, his muscles coiled, and in that frozen moment he felt the quiet certainty of a predator ready to lunge. The corner was no prison. It was a throne. The first shot rang out, and the hunt truly began. The first blast scorched the wall inches from Kane's head, the white-hot hiss searing the air. He moved before the echo faded, pivoting low and fast, firing a short burst down the corridor. The lead Varrict soldier dropped in a convulsion of sparks, his rifle clattering across the steel floor. Kane did not linger. He snatched the weapon mid-stride, slung his own nearly empty rifle, and rolled into the shadows. Screams rose from the alien squad as their line buckled. The derelict station became a labyrinth of ricochets and smoke, every sound twisted by the narrow passageways. Kane used it all, echo, light, silence, as weapons. He darted between bulkheads, firing once, twice, never wasting ammunition. His shots were not wild but surgical, each one aimed to cripple morale as much as bodies. The Varrict were trained for open hunts, not knife fights in corridors that reeked of rust and blood. Behind him, boots thundered as the rear squad closed in, their snarls cutting through the din. Kane wrenched a panel from the wall, exposing a knot of wires, and ripped two free. Sparks leapt. He shoved the alien rifle's power cell against the stripped ends. A blinding flash erupted, drowning the hallway in light and static. The Varrict cursed in their own tongue, disoriented. Kane was already moving. He vaulted over a fallen soldier, seized the carbine from his claws, and pressed it into service before the alien's body had cooled. Shots rang down the corridor, wide and panicked. Kane pressed himself against a bulkhead, sighted carefully, and dropped two more. A third tried to rally, hissing commands, but Kane cut him down with a single round to the throat. The aliens were beginning to understand. The human was not retreating. He was advancing. One of them shouted a warning, voice sharp with panic, "He is Deathworld." The phrase carried through the ranks like a contagion. Even the disciplined ones faltered. To them, Kane was no longer a man with a rifle. He was the embodiment of every story whispered in hushed voices across the stars. He was the predator they had been warned about since childhood. Kane drove the fear deeper. He left one alive deliberately, a soldier pinned under the carcass of a fallen comrade. He met the alien's eyes for a heartbeat, then turned away, firing down the corridor at the next group pressing forward. The survivors' screams of terror carried louder than any weapon, fueling panic. He moved with ruthless efficiency, not rushing, not wasting. He had learned in Earth's jungles that to run wildly was to invite death. Instead, he advanced like the predators he once studied, measured, relentless, inevitable. Every corridor became a hunting ground. Every flicker of light, an ally. The station itself seemed to side with him. Its flickering lights cast monstrous shadows that magnified his presence. Metal groaned as if groaning at the carnage. Kane slipped between broken doors and warped plating, his figure glimpsed only in flashes, here, gone, then suddenly too close. The Varict fought an enemy who was everywhere and nowhere. When his weapon clicked empty, Kane did not falter. He smashed the butt into an alien's jaw, wrenched free the carbine, and turned it against its owner's comrades in the same motion. His movements were economical, devoid of flourish, yet they radiated brutality. He fought like a man who had carried war across deserts and ice, through storms and smoke. The aliens attempted to regroup. They fell back toward a junction, throwing up a barricade of overturned crates and debris. Kane let them. He slowed his advance, listening to the scrape of claws, the hiss of fear-filled breaths. He wanted them to believe the barricade meant safety. Then he yanked a grenade from the belt of a fallen soldier, twisted its casing to expose the priming core, and rolled it into the heap. The explosion turned their shelter into shrapnel, screams shredded by fire. Smoke thickened the corridor, and through it Kane emerged like a phantom. Blood streaked his face, his muscles burned, but his eyes were steady. To the Varict, he no longer looked human. He looked inevitable. A commander tried to rally them, his voice commanding, almost convincing, until Kane's rifle spoke once and silenced him. The survivors scattered. Kane let them run. Panic was a sharper weapon than bullets. He stalked the edges of the smoke, firing sparingly, each shot timed to drive them deeper into hysteria. One alien fell to his knees, babbling in broken trade tongue. Monster, human, no cage, no end, his cries fed the chaos. Kane turned away, leaving him alive to spread the story. Fear would serve him better than another corpse. His body ached from exertion. The cuts on his arms stung where alien claws had found him. His chest heaved with the ragged pull of breath. Yet his focus never wavered. Pain was familiar. On Earth, pain was the price of survival. He carried it as easily as others carried weapons. The corridor ahead was quiet now, littered with bodies and scorched metal. The silence carried a strange weight, not relief but anticipation. Kane wiped blood from his cheek with the back of his hand and let the stillness settle. He knew the Varict would not stop. Their pride would not allow retreat, not yet. They would regroup, send more, try again. And he would be waiting. He crouched beside the wreckage, stripped another rifle, checked its charge. Enough to last. His fingers moved automatically, the ritual of a soldier who had lived too long in battle. He thought of the Varict commanders beyond the barricades, their smug certainty evaporating with every squad lost. He wondered if they remembered the warnings their own scouts had whispered, *never corner a Deathworlder. The irony was sharp. They thought the corridors had trapped him. In truth, they had trapped themselves, packed into steel tubes where his ferocity thrived. Every step they took toward him only narrowed their chances of survival. Kane leaned back against the wall, breathing slowly, letting his heartbeat steady. The silence stretched, broken only by the crackle of flames and the faint drip of blood from steel beams above. His shadow stretched long across the carnage, a silent testament to the futility of the hunt. He spoke aloud, his voice rough but steady, knowing no one lived close enough to hear. Now you understand. He had bought himself time, but not safety. More squads would come. The station still crawled with hostile boots. The fight was far from over. Yet this victory was enough to shift the balance. No longer was he prey driven into corners. He had shown them the cost of pressing him, the price of arrogance. In the smoky stillness of that corridor, surrounded by bodies and firelight, Kane straightened and slung the rifle over his shoulder. His lips curved into a grim smile. The hunt was far from finished. And somewhere deeper in the station, he knew the Varict commanders were beginning to doubt. Their certainty had cracked. Fear had taken root. That was all he needed. The command deck of the Varict strike team reeked of ozone and fear. Commander Varick stood rigid before the tactical display, his scaled fingers drumming against the console, eyes fixed on the crimson icons marking dead squads. Too many. Far too many. What was supposed to be a simple hunt had devolved into a slaughter, and the prey they thought caged now stalked them from the shadows of the station. His subordinates whispered in corners, their tails twitching nervously. None dared meet his gaze. He knew what they whispered about, The human, the Deathworlder, the phantom who walked their corridors. In another wing of the station, Kane moved like smoke through the darkened vents. His breath rasped softly, his body weary but unbroken. He had learned long ago that fatigue could be masked, pushed aside, even weaponized. Exhaustion made men sloppy, but Kane treated it as an old friend. It reminded him of survival marches across Earth's deserts where water was scarce and every dune hid death. The ache in his bones told him he was still alive, and that was all he required. The Varict regrouped at choke points, building barricades of steel and debris, setting up overlapping fields of fire. They thought it clever, thought they were preparing for him. Kane studied them through broken grates above, memorizing their formations, their nervous habits, the way their claws trembled against triggers. He saw hesitation in their movements, caught the flick of their eyes toward the shadows. Fear had taken root. That was more useful than any weapon he carried. One squad huddled too close to their barricade, muttering about the human. Kane dropped into their midst like a hammer from the dark. His knife flashed once, twice, and 3 bodies crumpled before the rest even raised their rifles. A single survivor fled, shrieking about the monster among them. Kane let him run. Panic would echo louder than gunfire. On the command deck, Varick snarled as the feed blinked out, another squad erased. Cowards, he spat, though his own scales rippled with unease. The human fought like no species he had faced. Others broke under superior numbers. Others begged when cornered. But this one grew stronger, more feral, the tighter the noose drew. Varick's pride insisted the human must eventually falter, yet some quieter instinct told him he had misjudged. Perhaps the whispers carried truth after all. Kane pressed forward, silent as the grave. His weapons were scavenged and mismatched, each one stripped from fallen foes, but he wielded them with lethal confidence. He set ambushes with precision, tripping a power relay to plunge a hall into darkness before striking, rigging a loose bulkhead to fall and crush 2 soldiers at once. Every trap served not only to kill but to remind the Varict they were prey. He left corpses in doorways, positioned as warnings. He whispered in their tongue over captured comms, his voice distorted by static, "I am coming." The effect was devastating. Morale fractured. Soldiers refused to advance down certain corridors. Some fired wildly at shadows. One entire fire team deserted, abandoning their posts and fleeing toward escape pods that had long since been jettisoned. Varick executed 2 officers to reassert control, but even that only deepened the terror. Fear of their commander was tangible, but fear of the Deathworlder was primal. Kane knew he could not fight forever. His body bore wounds from claws and shrapnel, his strength dwindling. Yet he understood the Varict less with every passing hour. For all their technology, their weapons, and their numbers, they lacked the most vital instinct, the ability to adapt when the world turned hostile. On Earth, adaptation was survival. Here, their reliance on numbers betrayed them. They were creatures of habit, and habit was predictable. He remembered a storm from his youth, a cyclone that tore through a coastal settlement, flattening homes and scattering families. He had been a boy then, clinging to wreckage as the ocean tried to claim him. That night he learned that nothing, no wall, no weapon, no prayer, could resist nature's fury. You endured, or you drowned. The memory burned in him still, and he carried it into every battle. Tonight, he was the storm. Through broken ducts he reached the deck above the Varict command post. Voices rose from below, harsh and angry, yet tinged with something else, panic-edged with disbelief. Varick shouted, demanding formations, calling for courage, but his tone betrayed the cracking of certainty. Kane crouched in the shadows, listening. He recognized the sound of a leader bleeding confidence. It was the sound predators made when they realized they no longer hunted. He dropped into the next corridor, boots silent on the steel. A patrol rounded the corner too late. Kane struck like a striking serpent, rifle stock smashing one skull, blade slicing another. The last turned and fled, hissing in terror. Kane did not chase. He wanted him to reach the command deck, to carry the sight of his comrade's blood still steaming on the floor. The message would deliver itself. The station groaned, its aging systems strained by the conflict. Flickering lights painted everything in harsh strobes, making Kane's figure appear and vanish like a phantom. He used it mercilessly, letting the Varict catch glimpses, never the whole. Their minds filled the gaps with nightmares far worse than reality. Each scream that echoed down the halls strengthened his grip on their sanity. Varick stood at the center of chaos, clawed fists clenched as reports poured in. Squads gone. Officers dead. Soldiers refusing orders. He slammed his tail against the deck in fury, but his rage could not mask the tremor in his voice. "He is one man," he barked, though his eyes flicked toward the sealed doors as if expecting Kane to step through at any moment. One man cannot break the clan. Yet deep inside, he wondered if perhaps one man could. Kane pressed closer. He had thinned their numbers, shredded their discipline. Now only the command deck remained, the heart of the hunt. His body screamed for rest, but his mind was sharpened steel. He knew this was the fulcrum, the moment where predator and prey would finally meet without shadow between them. He wiped blood from his brow, adjusted the grip on his stolen rifle, and let his voice carry through the station's comm system. Distorted, low, and certain, it echoed from every speaker. "I warned you." Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of alien breaths. Varick's tail lashed the deck, but even he could not stop the ripple of fear that spread through his command crew. Kane could almost taste it through the walls, thick and heavy as smoke. The corridors behind him were littered with the dead, their bodies testament to his resolve. Ahead lay the command deck, sealed and guarded, yet fragile beneath the weight of fear. Kane pressed his palm against the bulkhead, feeling the vibrations of movement beyond. He could sense them shifting, arguing, unraveling. This was no longer a battle for survival. It was the unraveling of an entire hunt, a lesson carved in blood and terror. The Varict had thought him a cornered beast. Now they understood. He was not caged. He was circling, waiting for the final strike. Kane inhaled deeply, let the silence steady him, then moved toward the doors. The command deck was next. And when it fell, the galaxy would remember why no one should ever corner a Deathworlder. The command deck doors loomed before Kane, reinforced plates meant to withstand boarding parties and bombardment alike. To the Varict, they were symbols of security, a last redoubt where the clan's authority could not be shaken. To Kane, they were nothing but another obstacle, and obstacles were meant to be broken. He crouched beside a ruined console, stripped a charge pack from his stolen rifle, and wired it crudely with torn filament. The makeshift explosive was inelegant but sufficient. He pressed it to the seam of the door, stepped back, and braced himself. The detonation rocked the corridor, sending shards of metal shrieking into the air. When the smoke cleared, the door sagged on twisted hinges, bleeding sparks. Kane rose and pushed his way through. Inside, the Varict froze. Commanders, officers, soldiers all turned as the human emerged from the haze, blooded yet unbowed, eyes burning with the cold certainty of a man who had survived every trap set against him. The chamber stank of fear cloaked in bravado, the slavers clutching weapons yet hesitating to fire. At their center stood Commander Varick, his scales gleaming under the harsh lights, his crest flared high in defiance. He bared his teeth in a snarl, masking the tremor in his voice. "You think yourself a predator," Varick spat. "But you are one. A single man. A cornered beast." Kane stepped further into the room, boots echoing against the deck. He said nothing at first. Silence was more powerful than any insult. His gaze swept the chamber, weighing each foe, marking exits, counting weapons. He carried himself not as prey dragged before judgment, but as a hunter surveying the herd. Only then did he speak, his voice quiet but carrying, every syllable edged with iron. "You made a mistake," he said. "You thought the corner was mine. It's yours." The words rippled through the Varict, fraying nerves already taut. Some hissed in anger, others shifted back, claws tapping nervously against the deck. Varick roared, snapping their focus, and lifted his plasma pike. The weapon's coils glowed blue, humming with lethal promise. He advanced with deliberate steps, tail swaying behind him. Kane squared his shoulders, rifle in hand, though he knew it would not last long against the commander's armor. He had faced worse. The duel began with a flash of light. Varick struck first, the pike lancing toward Kane's chest. Kane twisted aside, the beam grazing his shoulder with a searing kiss of fire. The smell of charred fabric filled the air, but Kane's expression did not break. He dropped his empty rifle, closed the distance, and drove the butt of another weapon into Varric's jaw. The commander staggered but recovered quickly, tail whipping in a vicious arc. It caught Kane across the ribs, knocking him back into a console that shattered under the impact. Pain lanced through him, but Kane pushed off the wreckage, lungs heaving, muscles alive with fury. He lunged, knife flashing from his belt, slashing across Varric's arm. The blade bit through scales, drawing a hiss of pain. The Varric retaliated with a downward strike of the pike, the blow shattering metal and throwing sparks as Kane rolled clear. The chamber erupted in chaos, officers shouting, some firing blindly, others frozen in awe of the spectacle. Kane moved like a man possessed, every motion honed by decades of survival. He ducked low, drove his shoulder into Varric's chest, and forced the commander back a step. They grappled in brutal silence, claws tearing, fists striking, bodies slamming into consoles. Kane's knife clattered away, lost in the melee, but his bare hands were weapons enough. He hammered blows into Varric's jaw, into his ribs, until the alien shoved him back with raw strength. Blood streaked both of them, red and black mixing on the floor. Varric's eyes burned with hatred, yet behind the fury Kane saw something else: recognition. The commander had fought countless battles, crushed countless foes, but never had he faced one who refused to break. The realization was sinking in: humans did not yield. They endured. Kane's chest heaved as he steadied himself. "You don't get it, do you?" he growled, his voice hoarse yet unwavering. "Earth taught us one lesson: survive. Storms, predators, hunger, none of it broke us. You think numbers make you strong? Numbers don't matter. Adaptation does. Resilience does. When the world corners you, you fight harder. That's what it means to be human." The words landed like strikes of their own, piercing deeper than blades. Some Varric lowered their weapons, eyes flicking uncertainly between Kane and their commander. Varric bared his teeth in rage, refusing the truth pressing against him. He lunged with the pike, roaring, but Kane was already moving. He sidestepped, seized the shaft, and wrenched it sideways with every ounce of strength left in him. The weapon tore free from Varric's grip. Kane swung it in a brutal arc, slamming the crackling coils into the commander's chest. The impact hurled him back against the central console, sparks erupting as systems overloaded. The chamber fell silent save for the hum of failing machinery. Varric slumped against the console, smoke rising from his scales. His breath rattled, eyes wide with disbelief. He choked out words, each one dripping with bitter realization. "This is why you never corner a Deathworlder." Kane stood over him, chest heaving, pike trembling in his grip. He did not gloat, did not roar in triumph. He simply stared down at the broken commander, the weight of survival heavy on his shoulders. Around them, the surviving Varric lowered their weapons, their courage spent. Fear, respect, and something like awe filled their eyes. Kane let the pike clatter to the floor. He did not need it anymore. The fight was over. The point had been made in blood and fire. He turned, limping toward the ruined door, every step echoing through the silence. The Varric parted before him, none daring to stand in his way. Their legend of the Deathworlder was no longer whispered rumor, it was truth made flesh. He reached the corridor beyond, the station groaning around him. Pain gnawed at his body, his wounds screaming for rest, but he pressed on. Survival was not about comfort. It was about moving forward, no matter how much it hurt. He did not fight for glory, not for vengeance. He fought because there was no other choice. That was the essence of Earth. That was the essence of him. As he disappeared into the smoke-filled halls, whispers followed in his wake. The Varric would carry the tale across the stars. They would speak of the man who turned a trap into a massacre, who shattered their pride, who taught them what it meant to corner a child of a deathworld. Kane knew the galaxy would hear it soon enough. He paused once, leaning against the wall, breath ragged, vision blurred. Yet his lips curled into a grim smile, sharp and tired. "Earth made me this way," he murmured, voice lost to the hum of failing lights. The galaxy will just have to live with it. Then he pushed onward, deeper into the unknown, leaving behind wreckage, silence, and a legend carved in fear.